What exactly did you observe in the last 8 months?
In the last 8 months, we have observed a big shock, of course. I mean, like anyone else, I think, in the world, especially in April and March. We were quite nervous because we didn't know what's going to happen with the pandemic and especially what's going to happen with the prices here in Germany. But we were quite lucky. The German economy actually performed much better than we have feared. And I have to say thank you for the federal government, because what they've did to the German economy was fantastic. They've supported most of the local businesses. And when we're looking on property prices here in Berlin, you have to differentiate between a property you're buying for self-use and a property you're living in maybe already, and also a property you're buying for an investment. What we have seen is more or less based on the so-called rent ceiling, on the rent freeze, but that already happened last year, winter last year or fall last year, when a lot of our investors have decided not to buy in Berlin because of the rent ceiling, because they're really scared of what the local government might come up with next, even though they speak to the lawyers and the lawyers will confirm that the rent ceiling probably won't sustain in front of the federal court. However, it has demonstrated to the worldwide public not basically to buy investment properties here in Berlin. So this is a negative one. However, this is only for the old buildings. All the new buildings are actually going through the roof in terms of pricing. We have seen a massive price increase on the new build here in Berlin, even during the Corona crisis. Property prices are still growing and growing, even though the prices are not growing as much as we have seen in the last couple of years. But at least the market is stable and growing by 2 to 4% in average.
Next question is, what effects does the rent cap have on the willingness to invest in Berlin?
So the rent cap is, of course, is a big factor. It's much more important for investors than the pandemic. The reasons for the investor at the moment to purchase in Berlin is safety and security. And if you then confront them with a regulation, which is basically taking them away potential profits, and we have to say these profits these investors are looking at aren't really high. They're happy with 2 to 3% return. So no one here is greedy. What people are looking for is safety and stability, quite similar to a savings account, where we have the 10-year tax advantage. So if you hold the property for 10 years or longer and you then sell it and it's in your private name, you will not pay any income tax here in Germany. That's the status quo as of today. So we have seen, to answer your question, yes, the impact of the rent ceiling was there, especially when we're looking on elderly buildings. Elderly buildings according to the law is everything that has been built before 2014, which is again something the judges have to decide. But for the new build actually has no effect. However, there are a lot of developers who have decided not to invest in Berlin at the moment. That means there's less supply on the market, but the demand is still very high.
Mm-hmm. Are there winners or losers in this pandemic?
Of course, I think there are always winners and losers. The big question is if the pandemic is the reason, or maybe it was something else. So people who already have over speculated before, they already had problems in 2019, quite similar to a lot of businesses in the pandemic. When your business isn't doing well before the pandemic, during the pandemic, usually your business is not doing any better. Same as properties, so the residential property market actually is a big winner, I have to say. We can see fantastic transactions this year. We had a huge amount of luxury property sales this year. We have a huge amount of demand from buyers out there because they all want to live in their own house or in their own apartment. So quite similar what you just have said in German. We have a lot of people, especially who want to live outside of the city center, because if the restaurants are closed, if the shopping malls are closed, if the cultural offers Berlin is giving any citizen are closing down, there's no reason to live here. So you can live for half the price or even a percentage outside of the city center. Losers, I have to say, are, well, we're not really having losers, but the commercial property segment, especially the retail, but they already had problems before the crisis, and of course the hotels, the little shops, they're all really struggling to pay the rent or to pay the mortgage.
Okay. Next question. Are there new buyer groups or different seller groups?
Yes, I would say we have new buyer groups. In general, we have a lot of German expats who have lived elsewhere who are coming back to Germany because they are not really happy in the US, how the US is treating the pandemic. So we have a lot of expats coming back to Germany. We're also having a lot of local people who are tenants and have already said, oh, the prices are too high to buy a property, I'm happy in my small apartment, I'm going to live here, everything is fine. However, these people actually have decided, wait a minute, I now have to do home office, I have to work from home, so rather have a better home than I have at the moment. So they are actually contacting us. So we have a lot of local buyers, Berliners or other Germans who are living in other cities who want to come to Berlin or to Leipzig or to Brandenburg or to Magdeburg, where they want to buy their own apartment or their own house. However, the biggest demand is family homes. That's the biggest demand, especially for the middle class. So people not, there we have a massive demand. So people who everything between 250 to 500, 600,000 euros. So this is the biggest demand we have from people so far.
Okay. Next question. Isn't renting much better than buying by now?
Well, renting is always better if you want to lose a lot of money. That's something you can calculate quite easily. However, it's something, it has to do with your life decision, what you're looking for in the future, especially in big cities where I think property prices, especially when you look on the German market, in the last 30 to 50 years, you can look what's happening to the German property market in a crisis. We always have been, the market always was stable here. It hasn't grown that much, but it was stable. So if you want to do a safe investment, buying a property is pretty good. If you want to stay just a short period of time in your apartment, of course, renting is a better option. However, renting is usually always more expensive if you do the calculation correctly, because if you buy a property, I'm sure you as an international buyer are used to this. The Germans are sometimes a bit strange when it comes to renting, because they tend to rent their apartment for their entire life rather than to buy it, and they could have bought it 3-4 times with the rent they have paid. But of course, buying is still cheaper than renting in general terms. And of course, we're happy to give you a precise valuation when you want to buy property, which again is free. You can use our website. We have different tools on the website. We have the price maps, we have the rental maps for the cities of Berlin and Leipzig, where you can check what's cheaper, renting or buying. They are of course in English, and the maps are done by the public transport system, which is of course very important for us when we do the valuations, that you have the opportunity to check actually where is my next tram station, tube station, overground, underground, bus station. All these things are very important. So this is up on the website. If you have a precise property you want to sell, you want to buy, you can of course use our website. We have a so-called estimation tool or a valuation tool, which again is free. You can fill it out. It's on the website. It's Mr. Müller or myself will contact you. So if you're a German speaking customer, Mr. Müller will contact you, and if you're an English speaking customer, I will talk to you, and we of course will help you to do a proper valuation. Again, this tool on the website is free. It gives you a price range. So there are quite a couple of things where we can help you, or you just contact us directly, and then of course we're going to help you with specific questions.
Okay, thank you. The next one, how is the price developing in the apartment market in Berlin in 2020?
So the price development in 2020 in Berlin, you have to really differentiate between a capital investment, if it's a new build or an old build. I think I already explained it why, because of the rent ceiling. And of course the prices are different. So if you have bought a property, let's say last year in Berlin or 2 years ago, you still have a nice little growth, assuming you haven't overpaid for the property. But in general terms, if you go through a good broker, you will not overpay the property. Actually, one of the advantages in paying a commission to us is that you get a realistic market price and a fair valuation. So the markets in Berlin, you have to differentiate between buying property where you want to live in and buying property as a capital investment. For instance, we have seen fantastic capital investments in the last couple of years. Anything that's a new build, or, funny enough, tenanted apartments. So tenanted apartments you still can get very, very cheap even today, and prices for tenanted apartments are properties that you buy, or apartments you buy where you cannot take out the tenant because they are protected by the German tenant law, which are very, very strict. So you have to keep the tenant, but therefore the property is much, much cheaper than the same property would be if it's vacant. So that's still a very good investment, and please feel free to contact us. Again, prices on tenanted apartments are not rising at the moment. Actually, they might be even under pressure. So there might be a few good bargains out there, where if you have a vacant apartment where you want to move in, or you then want to do a new rental contract with maybe a flat share or a furnished apartment, a short-term letting, again, that's something you should also contact us directly, if that's actually legally possible or not.
Okay, thank you. The next one is the effect of the cap on the market visible? And the second question is, what do you expect for the future impact to be?
Yeah, so the cap already is visible, as I said before, and the future development I think is very optimistic for Berlin, so I just can advise you to check, for instance, the Deutsche Bank report that already has done the estimation of the effects of the rent ceiling or the rent cap on the Berlin property market, but also in other cities. I mean, for instance, Leipzig and Magdeburg are two cities where I have to say they have no rent cap, and they have a very, very good outlook because we have fantastic macroeconomic figures. And again, if you look on the investment decision, and this is something I really like on our international investors, they're always looking on the macroeconomics. So they know that politicians and laws are coming and going, but property is stable, it stays. And as long as you have no vacancy or very little vacancy rates, you will always have a yield, regardless which percentage, but there will be always a yield. And as long as your cash flow system is positive or at least neutral as an investor, there is a big opportunity to invest here.
Yeah, okay. Okay, the last question for today. Could we have a potentially oversupply of apartments and undersupply of larger family housing with garden space?
Yes, we do have quite a big oversupply. So if you look on the areas you're looking at, I mean, what people are looking or what they actually want to buy are nice apartments where they have enough space, where you have a garden, a balcony, and ideally in the city center. This, of course, as you know, Andreas, doesn't really exist, or you have to pay a fortune for it. So again, these prices are going up. So that's quite positive for these people who own these apartments or these houses. But very, very few people own them. So most of the people who want to buy them, they don't have the funds to buy them. Yeah. So that's a big thing. However, what are these people doing? Especially when they're living in a small apartment, they're either selling it now or they're letting it out and are moving to other areas. And because they can do work from home, they can do home office, they can live outside the city center, and they either commute twice a week to the city center or to their jobs. There are even companies who are now deciding to actually open offices outside of Berlin or outside the city centers because they already see that a lot of their employees are not really living anymore in the city center. Again, I think we have seen that in other big cities in the world, like New York, like London, like Paris, Madrid, Rome, etc. And I think this trend is also happening here in Berlin. So a lot of our goods, we call them investment products or properties you might look at, are not in the city center of Berlin. This is something a lot of our international investors are not really looking at, and I think that's a mistake because everyone is focusing their investment focus on the big hotspots, which is in Berlin, Mitte, Kreuzberg, Prenzlauer Berg, Charlottenburg.
Yeah, okay.
Nowadays even Neukölln, and so a lot of people are going always on the same areas, but I think the capital growth figures, if you go in other areas here in Germany, especially when you look in Leipzig where we have standard yield of 4%, whereas in Berlin we are very, very lucky if we get 3%, or if you look a bit outside of the city center of Berlin, we call that the S-Bahn ring. So if you look on our price maps and rental maps, you will see that everything that's outside the S-Bahn ring is much, much cheaper. But there is a higher potential of growth because there are simply more people who can afford to buy these kind of apartments and villas and houses rather than the city center. And of course, if you are in the pandemic, and of course the pandemic will end whenever it will end, but the recession we are now in doesn't end when the pandemic ends. It will take some time, and I think if you watch the news and if you listen to the experts, you will see that the billions and billions we have lost in the world this year when we had the pandemic, so 2020, before we recover it, it will take us approximately 10 years if we're lucky. So of course there will be less people who have the money to buy expensive apartments. What we can see in the market is that the luxury apartments are doing very well. The areas outside of the city centers are doing very well. What's a little bit under pressure are the normal apartments with sitting tenants.
In the middle.
Exactly, because in the middle class there are many people who are not having the funds to buy or to rent. Yeah? Yeah. When you ask me about the rental market, which is still very strong, so this is a big question, of course. What's happening to the rental market? We just have spoken about the prices. The rental market is very, very strong in Berlin, especially if you do a fair letting system. And I think we have spoken about the rent ceiling with the lawyer already, and please feel free to contact us. So there are many ways of renting out your apartments. You can do it classic. You can do a classical rental contract, you can do it short term, you can do flat shares, there are many different options. All of these have to be checked by a lawyer if it's legal or not, and if it's something for you or if it's not something for you. Every system has its pros and cons. However, generally speaking, the rental market is very, very strong. So the likelihood you're going to have a vacant apartment that doesn't generate any income for you in Berlin, in the suburbs, or in any big German city is very, very low. And I think that is the big message. A lot of our investors, just a big point, are here for capital growth. So they are happy if the rents are basically covering the mortgage, the house geld, and everything else. But of course, they want a capital growth. So the big question is, what's the capital growth? Do we think that the capital growth will continue to rise as it has risen in the past 10 years? Of course, we don't think so. I think capital growth rates now have to be seen differently. We had fantastic growth rates. If you go on a website, we have a few examples where we had over 300, sometimes even over 500% capital growth. So people have bought apartments in Charlottenburg for 80,000, 90,000 euros 10, 15 years ago, tenanted apartments with elderly tenants. The tenants now have left after 10 or 15 years, and now they're selling these apartments and refurbish it for something like 200, 300, 400,000 euros. If you then make your math, you know what fantastic capital growth we had in the last 10 years. Of course, 90,000 euros in Charlottenburg doesn't exist anymore. The big question is, do we have the same growth rate in the next 10 years? We, as conservative brokers here in Germany and Berlin, we don't think so. We think capital growth rates between 3 to 5% are realistic. We are advising this now for over 3 years. In the past 3 years, we have been the conservative guys, not promising crazy rates, and we always have been outperformed by the market, where the market has generated higher capital growth rates. However, please be aware these growth rates are just book values or values in your balance sheet. They don't really exist on your bank account. So the important message is that we don't see the market falling, so your money is safe. And looking at other cities in the world where else you could invest the money, I think here in Germany, and especially if you're looking at the big cities, you still find a lot of undervalued assets where you have yields between 3 to 6% realistically, with very little maintenance, with very little problems. Germany is a very regulated market, which has the pros and of course the cons. We just spoke about the cons with the rent ceiling. And of course we have different webinars and shows where we talk about the cons and the pros on the rent ceiling. But generally speaking, you're pretty safe. We have a very strong legal system. And even though some funny politicians in some cities like in Berlin are making crazy laws, I think they just don't have the economic background.
One information, Berlin is not under the top 100 from the rent prices from in the cities in Germany. Not under the 100.
So Berlin, Andreas, thank you, is the only capital, I think, in the world where it's cheaper to live than in other cities in the country. For instance, Munich, Hamburg, Cologne, Düsseldorf,
top
Frankfurt.
7 and other one,
So this is pretty much up to prices today. If there are no questions in the chat, Lucy, are any questions in English? Okay. So if you have questions for us, please don't hesitate to contact us, either by email, call us, send us Facebook, Instagram messages. I think we're here pretty much anytime, and we have a great team. I have to say thank you for listening today.
Thank you very much.
Of course, you can watch it on YouTube. Vielen Dank zum Zuschauen. Lucy, vielen Dank für die Sendung heute. Thank you, Lucy, our colleague. Have a nice evening. Schönen Abend.
Bye bye.